Hello and welcome to the Biological Anthropology lecture series. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. Here we explore what it means to be human, biologically, evolutionarily, and behaviorally. Let's begin our journey into the science of humanity. Welcome to Module 11, the Agricultural Revolution. Here we explore how the agricultural revolution reshaped human biology, health, and our evolutionary trajectory. In this section, we examine how agriculture marks the moment when humans became a primary evolutionary force acting upon themselves. Understanding how this shift occurred helps us make sense of the evolutionary present and prepares us to think more carefully about what may happen as the pace of change accelerates even further. Let's revisit how evolution usually works. In most species, biological change happens slowly, driven by natural selection, acting on random variation over many generations. Organisms adapt to environments they did not create. Humans followed this pattern for most of their history as well. Then agriculture changed the relationship entirely. Let's look at what agriculture introduced into the evolutionary process. With farming, humans began actively reshaping their environments in consistent, long-term ways. Fields were cleared, water was redirected, plants were selected for specific traits, and animals were bred under human control. Think about how different this is from simply responding to a changing climate or a new predator. Humans were now constructing the very conditions that shaped survival and reproduction. When culture alters environments this powerfully, it becomes a major evolutionary force. Diets based on domesticated crops created new nutritional profiles. Permanent settlements produced dense living conditions and novel disease ecologies. Daily labor patterns changed how bodies were used. Over generations, human biology responded, not because genes suddenly changed direction, but because cultural practices reshaped which traits were advantageous. You might wonder why this matters from an evolutionary perspective. The key insight is that culture can move much faster than biology. Farming practices can change within a few generations, but genetic adaptation takes far longer. This creates a situation where human bodies are constantly adjusting to environments that are shifting ahead of them. Agriculture is the earliest clear example of this imbalance between cultural speed and biological response. Let's consider a concrete illustration. Once humans began consuming animal milk beyond infancy, most adults were biologically unable to digest lactose. In some populations, continued milk consumption created a selective pressure favoring individuals who could digest lactose into adulthood. Over time, this cultural behavior, dairying, shaped genetic change. Culture didn't replace biology, it redirected it. That's a powerful shift in how evolution operates. Think of agriculture, then, as the moment humans stepped into a new evolutionary role. Instead of being shaped primarily by external environments, humans began shaping themselves through cultural systems. Fields, food storage, and social organization became part of the selective landscape. As we reflect on this, keep one idea in focus. Agriculture shows us that human evolution is no longer driven only by nature acting on bodies, but by culture acting on biology. This does not mean evolution stopped. It means the engine changed. And once that engine was in place, it set the pattern for everything that followed in the human evolutionary story. Let's revisit an idea that helps tie everything together. Evolution takes time. Human biology is shaped by selective pressures acting over thousands of generations, not decades or centuries. Culture, however, can change extremely quickly. When those two timelines fall out of sync, we see what anthropologists call evolutionary mismatch. Let's look at how agriculture created this mismatch. Human bodies evolved in environments characterized by mobility, dietary diversity, and periodic scarcity. Foraging life required endurance, flexible metabolism, and the ability to cope with uncertain food availability. Agriculture changed those conditions almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Diets became narrower, activity patterns more repetitive, and food availability more constant, at least during successful harvests. Think about how little time the body had to adjust to these changes. The human genome did not suddenly retool itself to match farming lifestyles. Instead, bodies responded plastically in the short term and genetically only in limited ways over much longer periods. As a result, many early agricultural populations show signs of stress, not because evolution failed, but because it hadn't caught up yet. You might wonder why this matters. It helps explain why cultural innovations can produce health costs even when they increase survival at the population level. Let's consider diet as an example. Foraging diets were varied and often high in fiber and protein. Agricultural diets frequently relied on a few carbohydrate-rich staples. Human metabolism, adapted to managing scarcity, responded by efficiently storing energy. In agricultural settings, that efficiency could become a liability, increasing vulnerability to nutritional imbalances. This pattern did not disappear with early farming. It persisted as a background condition. The same logic applies to disease. Human immune systems evolved in small, dispersed populations. Permanent settlements brought high population density and constant exposure to pathogens. Bodies adapted through immune responses, but the speed and scale of exposure outpaced biological adjustment. Over time, some genetic adaptations emerged, but many costs remained. Think about this mismatch like wearing winter clothing in a tropical climate. The clothing worked perfectly in its original environment, but in the new context, it creates stress. The problem isn't the clothing, it's the change in conditions. Human biology works the same way. Traits that once enhanced survival can become sources of vulnerability when environments change rapidly. Now, let's zoom out. Agriculture was the first major instance of this evolutionary lag, but it would not be the last. It set a precedent for cultural change moving faster than biological evolution. This insight is crucial because it reframes health problems. Instead of viewing them as defects or failures, we can understand many as predictable outcomes of mismatch. Evolutionary mismatch reminds us that being human today means living in bodies shaped by a past that no longer fully exists. Agriculture revealed that gap for the first time, and once it appeared, it became a defining feature of the human evolutionary experience. Let's revisit what agriculture ultimately did to the human story. By domesticating plants and animals, humans didn't just change how they got food. They changed the scale, speed, and direction of their own evolution. Agriculture marks the first time culture became powerful enough to reshape biology across entire populations. That shift matters because it set a pattern that would not stop with farming. Let's look at agriculture as a kind of rehearsal. It showed us what happens when cultural systems move faster than biological adaptation. Fields expanded more quickly than bodies could adjust. Diets changed faster than jaws and teeth evolved. Settlements grew denser long before immune systems could fully respond. Think about that imbalance. Agriculture revealed that humans could create environments that outpaced their own evolutionary limits. Agriculture also taught humans that survival no longer depended only on biology. It depended on systems, food production, storage, cooperation, and planning. Success became increasingly tied to cultural organization rather than individual physical traits. You might wonder why this matters for evolution. The answer is that once survival depends on systems, selection pressures begin to operate differently. Cultural solutions start buffering some biological weaknesses while amplifying others. Let's take a step back and connect this to the bigger picture. After agriculture, humans did not return to a foraging baseline. Population growth locked societies into farming, land use intensified, and social complexity increased. Each generation inherited not just genes, but landscapes, technologies, and social rules. Evolution began operating inside a world humans had already engineered. Think about what that means going forward. If agriculture was the first major human-driven evolutionary force, it also opened the door to future transformations driven by even faster cultural change. Once humans learned to reshape environments deliberately, there was no clear boundary on how far that process could go. Agriculture normalized the idea that human survival could be redesigned. At the same time, agriculture exposed a recurring tension. Cultural innovation can solve immediate problems while creating long-term biological challenges. That tension becomes a defining feature of the evolutionary present. Bodies lag behind systems. Health problems emerge not because humans are poorly designed, but because they are living in worlds their biology did not originally evolve to handle. As we close this section, keep one idea firmly in mind. Agriculture did not end human evolution. It redirected it. By placing culture at the center of selective pressures, farming set the stage for future evolutionary phases shaped less by climate and predators and more by human decisions themselves. Now let's revisit the central idea of this section. Agriculture was not just a new subsistence strategy, it marked a fundamental shift in how human evolution works. By reshaping landscapes, diets, and social systems, humans began creating the very environments that would act back on their own biology. In doing so, culture became a powerful evolutionary force. Let's look at what this means in practical terms. Agriculture showed us that human evolution no longer depends only on slow changes in climate or geography. Instead, it responds to cultural decisions made within societies: what we eat, how we organize labor, where we live, and how we manage resources. Think about that for a moment. The selective pressures shaping human bodies increasingly come from human-made worlds. Now, this part is important. Culture moves faster than biology. Farming practices, settlement patterns, and social systems can change within a few generations, while genetic adaptation takes much longer. This mismatch produces stress, health challenges, and ongoing adjustment. You might wonder why this matters beyond ancient history. The answer is that agriculture revealed a pattern that continues today. Humans repeatedly create environments that outpace their biological limits. Think of agriculture as the first large-scale experiment in human-driven evolution. It succeeded in supporting massive population growth and complex societies, but it also introduced new vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are not signs of failure. They are evidence of a species navigating the consequences of its own ingenuity. As we close this section, keep one guiding idea in mind. Agriculture did not end evolution, it changed its direction. From this point forward, human biology would be shaped less by natural environments alone and more by cultural systems layered on top of them. This insight prepares us for what comes next. If agriculture was the first time culture became the environment, the question we now carry forward is simple but profound. What happens when cultural change accelerates beyond anything humans have experienced before? First, let's revisit the journey we've taken in this module. We began by tracing how humans moved from foraging to farming, not as a sudden breakthrough, but as a series of choices shaped by environment, population pressures, and cultural knowledge. Along the way, we saw how agriculture reorganized societies, anchored people to place, and set new rhythms for daily life. That shift alone would have been transformative, but it didn't stop there. Let's look at what agriculture did to the human body. Skeletons, teeth, and patterns of disease show us that farming carried real biological costs. Early agricultural populations often faced nutritional stress, heavier workloads, and increased exposure to infectious disease. You might wonder why this matters for understanding evolution. The answer is that agriculture reminds us that cultural success and biological well-being do not always move in the same direction. Agriculture also marks the moment when humans became a dominant evolutionary force acting on themselves. By reshaping environments through fields, settlements, and food systems, culture began generating the selective pressures that biology had to respond to. This created a new evolutionary dynamic, one defined by mismatch, lag, and ongoing adjustment rather than equilibrium. Think about what that means for the evolutionary present. We live in bodies shaped by a foraging past, operating inside worlds transformed by agriculture. Many modern health challenges make more sense when seen as extensions of this long process rather than as modern anomalies. As we close this module, keep one central idea in mind. Agriculture did not end human evolution. It redirected it. By placing culture at the center of evolutionary change, farming set the template for everything that followed. In the next module, we'll take that template forward and ask what happens when the pace of human-driven change accelerates even further, beyond fields and villages, into factories, information systems, and intelligent technologies. Thank you for joining this lecture. I'm Dr. Richard Jonathan O. Tadurin. I hope this session deepened your understanding of biological anthropology. Keep exploring what it means to be human. See you soon.